Hey guys, I want to speak about Satan, and I want to speak first of all let me say how I am referring to Satan. There is a force in this world that is of the negative within inside the spiritual realm, and I've come face to face with that force expressing itself through human beings, through animals, and through events which are clearly negatively founded, synchronistic but negatively founded, so it has a dark foundation to create the synchronicity. So just as we have God creating positive synchronicities like calling me to Tanzania with 1111, we also have this opposing force. You have these good angles of light, you have these bad angles of light, you have these good angels, you have these fallen angels. And this is just a way of describing the language of some force metaphysically behind us all that's doing stuff. Now, I used to think maybe it can only express itself through humans, because humans have a higher nature and a lower nature, and you will never find a disciplined human embracing satanic practices. You just will not find it. It doesn't happen. And by that I mean ultimately the things that lead you towards that dark satanic realm of these people who have sexual obsessions and all of these things like this. They are always plugged into their lower nature, plugged into their flesh. And because of that, they don't go into the higher states of consciousness. They don't go into the higher expressions of the human vehicle. And I mentioned this in the 666 Mark of the Beast video, that the ancients understood this and they used numerology to define that human consciousness expressed itself positively and negatively. But behind that expression, when you get into that lower vibratory state of the lower self, what is whispering to people? What is whispering to humans to make them do these things? Is there a foundation of this? Now, sometimes I see children who come into our care. You have to remember, some of the children that we have to love are murderers. This is life in a lot of the world, and they are not bad children. They are just not, but they were forgotten by humanity as a collective, is how I perceive it, and thus it's time for humanity as a collective to reach back in and try to save their souls, as it were, because these boys and girls, some of them, have been through the gates of hell, literally, and they've spent time at the dinner table of Satan and then come back out again, and it's just horrendous what they've been through. It's absolutely horrendous. You can't expect a human who's being tortured and harmed and abused by an adult to not grow up to become something like that unless someone interferes and puts love into the equation. So yes, I do see sometimes that the boys get into this lower state, and then I do see that something is on their shoulder. It's like that little angel and the little devil whispering, going this way and that way. And I know that I hear God. I know that I hear spirit. I know that I hear angels. I know that I'm guided by them. But I also know that people in service to God have been attacked and do get attacked, and I've been attacked by dark spiritual forces. Now, 2 times in my life, I've had close run-ins with witch doctors. One included a threatening text message about children dying, and the other time is when I went into an area where witch doctors were prevalent, and I extracted 2 children from that area. One with special needs, whose mother had created this problem by not getting her the vaccination she needed in that area, and then she got very sick. And the other, a child whose body had been cut and scarred everywhere by witch doctors because they were preparing him for who knows what. As we know, the witch doctors like to sacrifice the children. That's why many of them are in my care. And when I went to those places, I began vomiting blood within 48 hours both times of that happening. First time with the other, and then this again, and both were indeed spiritual attacks. And if you haven't seen the videos, they're up on my YouTube channel of these spiritual attacks and everything I went through to overcome. The most recent attack was November, I think it was, and everything that God threw together to overcome what had happened to me, because I was crippled and my hands were stuck like this one afternoon while I was vomiting blood, and I said to Fritzy, this is spiritual again, something's wrong. And then God let all hell loose upon this force that was in me, and I'll let you watch the video, but he used every single foundation of spiritual warriors on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, to tackle this. I had a pranic healer, I had devout Christians, I had hundreds of people praying. Outside my house I had about 70 people praying, and then I had a shaman doing an extraction as well from distance with proxy, and that was where I had a visitation as well and saw these blue beams of light I've never seen before in my life, but I saw it. That was the first time in my life I ever saw it, but they must have been required by God to do whatever. I don't know. I don't pretend to understand the experiences I go through fully, but I do know that I go through them, and that is how it is. Now, what I want to say though is other times in my life, aside from this dark witchcraft stuff that goes on, etc., and coming face to face with humans wanting to express, the will of Satan, as it were, the will of absolute darkness, then I have also seen animals being used to do this as well. And first example, I've got a guy who's worked with me since I arrived in Tanzania. First day I arrived, Ali. I've always been close friends with Ali. Now, Ali and I started the whole of the Children's Fund with a beat-up motorcycle. It was just me and him for about a year, and we became very close friends. And he had never seen a single snake in Uchira, not one. And he said, don't worry about snakes here, there aren't any. And he's lived in that village for 15 years, 15 or 20 years he's lived there. He said, you just don't worry about it, there's no snakes here, I've never seen a snake. Then all of a sudden, within a year of that discussion, I've nearly been bitten 3 times by Africa's deadliest snake. And on video, I'll upload the video I think this week as well. On video, there's a time where I took a child who had been tied up for 10 years on his back, Johanna, may he rest well, where I know he is now with Mother, Father, Creator. Sadly, he passed away not so long ago. But when he lived a happy life with us for a few years before he did, thankfully though. But when I found Johanna tied up, I took him to hospital, went back to get another child in my care who was struggling with kwashiorkor feeding syndrome and potentially could die, a little girl called Christina who was only 6-year-old at the time. And when I got there, my mind got very cloudy and I went outside with my camera and I was holding the camera up with the light, like this, sort of holding it like that. And I was walking and my brain was literally hurting and I thought, I'm just tired, what's going on? I'm so confused. And my dogs, the pack at the time, there were 7 out and the pack ran ahead of me. There was one in particular who got there first and growling and barking. And if they hadn't, I'd have stepped on a puff adder and I would have potentially died in Tanzania where I was. Unless your body manages to fight it off, I'd have definitely lost my leg, if nothing else. But most people die. It's the most common, it's the deadliest snake in Africa. It kills more people than any other. And it's killed a few of my dogs, as the puff adders as well, sadly. So, well, actually, that leads into it. The first time I left and there was nobody there fasting and praying at that time, now there are so many of the women who are like that and they're always praying and fasting and calling down that good energy, calling in the angels all the time, that the area is always quite safe these days. But back then, there wasn't many people doing what I did. I was holding up that side of things. And the very day I left Featherstail for the first time in a year, that very same day, a puff adder came in and bit my dog called Maran and killed him that night. The first day I left, and I see them as warning shots from Satan, saying, "I'm trying. I'm not getting off your back here." Now, something else that happened is my wonderful wife, she's a warrior in her own right. People don't understand how strong Fritzi is. She can be deceptive in her image. She doesn't look it, but Fritzi is the strongest woman I've met in my life. I'm going to go as far as to say that. It might sound biased because she's my wife, but she is a strong woman. Now, when I opened up my heart and fell in love with Fritzi, this became a strength, but it also becomes a weakness in the eyes of that enemy spiritual force, that dark force. And that dark force tormented Fritzi when she first came to Africa. And by that I mean every time she fell in love with a puppy dog, something would kill the puppy. Some sort of horrible parasitic infection, some sort of horrendous virus, something that dwells from the creation of shadow is how I see it. Not all life is equal. Some life has a heart, some does not. And we see it. There was a dog, one in particular. Fritzi's lost all of her dogs, and thankfully she stayed because it was enough to break your heart to see this repetitively over and over again. And I know that was a spiritual thing. I know it was. Now, there was one dog called Peanut, and Peanut was living in our house and all of a sudden came down very sick after being bitten by something, and we didn't know what, and Peanut was still very small. And there's a dog named after Peanut, actually, by somebody who climbed the mountain last year with us, Kilimanjaro. Because of watching Peanut, they then adopted a dog called Peanut because they saw this dog and it stuck with them. Anyway, Peanut was dying, and we act as doctors for the dogs. We do the drips, and we've learned how to do all of the IVs and everything like that, and cortisone if they get bitten by snakes, and all. We have to know a lot of stuff to do what we're doing. The vet's too far, and you can't do it in the middle of the night. 9 times out of 10 these things happen at night, which is chance, or the darkness itself hides the things that can hurt you. So Peanut was dying, and we had Peanut on fluids, and I went into Peanut's kennel and I sat against the wall to keep Peanut company with Fritzy and Roger as well, who's in charge of the animal rescue, who used to be a security guard, Maasai warrior, but now looks after the dogs. And you never see this, you never see it. Inside the kennel, I sat forward after about half an hour of sitting there, and Fritzy said, "Don't move," and there was a big scorpion on the wall behind my back. Now, by the grace of God, somehow my shoulders must have been on the wall and the scorpion in between my shoulder blades, and I didn't get stung, because that could have induced a heart attack. However, what was unbelievable to us is here's this scorpion, and then we bothered to look, and there are other scorpions in there as well. Now, you can go to any of the kennels, the dozens and dozens of kennels we have, and you can look for scorpions and you won't find them. You will not find them. But on this particular day, for some reason, they'd all homed in on this dog, and I saw that as a spiritual thing as well. So I surrounded the place with lavender, actually, and lavender allows... scorpions don't like lavender, so they can't pass through, and cinnamon as well. They hate cinnamon and lavender. So I put this around, and Peanut died anyway, sadly, due to just being weak from the infection that he had. So I've seen animals and come at the most unusual of times, and I've killed Africa's deadliest snake 6 times. I don't like killing, but I have, because they come in and they kill your dogs, they can kill your children, and they make a home where your home is if you don't kill them or catch them and remove them. Now, I don't mind the idea of catching them whatsoever, but I just don't have the equipment for it. It's quite simply. If anyone doesn't like that I kill the snakes, then donate me a snake grabber, and I'll quite happily catch them and take them somewhere. But I've killed the ones that I've found, and I fought spitting cobras after they've blinded my dogs. I fought one not long ago. Fritzy screaming from the window of the living room whilst I was fighting a red spitting cobra, which blinds you with a broomstick. And all of these things seem to happen at times of turmoil and emotional calamity. And I'm under no illusion that this sickness that I'm going through right now comes from the bite of a tick. Now, you've got hundreds of people living in Featherstail, and you've got thousands of tick bites for all people living there. In the past, not now, because everything's so well medicated that we don't get the tick problem anymore. But literally, out of all those bites, it happens to be me who's going to have the most impact on hurting the work that we do and hurting the children that gets the infections. And I mean, I'm not stupid enough to say that that's not coincidence, and thus I'm well aware that just as God goes into animals and helps us sometimes, then so too Satan can go into using a bad angle of light into the mind of certain animals and use them in a negative way. And I've seen this, I've witnessed this. And the thing you've got to remember is, quite simply, that Satan will try to challenge you, but as long as you stay rooted in God, can't win. Slow you down maybe. Slowed me down a little bit. But all he's managed to do, or she has managed to do with me, is give me time to reflect on how to strengthen the hold of Shaitan's in the air, how to strengthen my foundations and its foundations, so as it becomes completely unshakable when Satan tries again. because I've gone through it like warfare, and I see every crack in our armor and I'm fixing it. All I've done in this time is work out where my weaknesses are in myself, in my setup, in the charity, in the mission, in everything, in my health, in the structure, all of it. And just like warfare, I've analysed every little chink and crack in our armour, and I've begun to fill it. And yes, he will find new chinks. And yes, he will find new problems and new ways in. But every time this happens, and I am tested like this, it makes me laugh at his fickleness. And I say, you're a good friend to me, because if you hadn't sent that little creature with the infection to bite me that time, which I am certain came from there, then I would not have had this time to reflect upon all the other ways that I am weak and vulnerable, and thus the children which you feed on the suffering of when they are not with us are weak and vulnerable too. And this is the ultimate prize for this energy, is the children. When they are laid tied up and abandoned by all forms of love and light, and tied up in the dark with animals, as I found children for, like you say, for 10 years, then that negative energy is just absorbing that constantly, the torment, the suffering. It's just a constant thing. And in the culture where I live, in the society where I live, the expression of Satanism is expressed in the worst way with child sacrifice. And these child sacrifices are very real. I've stared out into the black of night with only one security guard when our whole dogs were running to every fence of our compound, because we knew there was a team of men there and we knew why they were there. They were there for our children. And you have to sometimes fight Satan in that way. I'm not a fighting man, but I had to stand with a machete in my hand, staring into the blackness with a little torch, trying to find who was there. Thankfully, which kind of makes you feel more comfortable, with a pack of 30 dogs who love me dearly and do indeed attack people who would jump over the fence. But this is a type of fight that is a physical fight, and this can happen. This can happen. But the satanic realm can use these creatures, animals, etc., and humans to express this negativity as well. And sometimes the battle in our lives, which we are closest to when it comes to fighting Satan, is inside our flesh. Every time. And most young men and women all over the world are fighting daily. And the reason they don't come under spiritual attack, and the reason, someone said to me the other week, we proper Christians, as if they have a monopoly on the term themselves of what Christ is, we don't come under spiritual attack, but you are. And I said, you're not on the front line. And if you're not doing anything, it is warfare, guys. It's warfare. And if you're not fighting in a war, why would they focus their energies on fighting you? And this is what I'm trying to show, is that we can all go into the service of God, but we have to be ready for the opposition ahead of us. And an undisciplined man, in my position, for example, would fail, because the first line of attack would be Satan through their flesh, and would tempt them with lust and with addiction and with all of these different small things that corrupt men constantly. And the undisciplined failed in history. In my village, white guys came and they just turned into alcoholics. They were just sleeping with all the women, and they failed miserably. They absolutely failed miserably, because they didn't have dominion over their flesh, and thus Satan could get into them that way. And when Satan can't get into you that way, he'll find another way. He might find a human to try and hurt you, so on and so forth. He might set up bizarre events which unbelievable. For instance, a pickup truck flipped over out of the miles and miles of road right outside my gate, and that meant that I was the first person who arrived to around about 20 people, all horrendously smashed up on the road outside of my home, and 5 of them died, some of which in my arms. This is not just coincidence, and I'm not saying that's an attack at me, but that's an attack at the community at large, and it's Satan's way of saying, I'm still here. And I'm in there saying, yes, but you need to get out of here. You need to just go away, kneel down and watch what light can do, because you are nothing but a lack of light. And thus, Satan can send animals, can work through your flesh. And some people, for some strange reason, think that disciplining your flesh is satanic, but that's because we have overactive amygdalas from the times that we lived in the forest, and we look for danger everywhere. And when you're sitting at home doing nothing and just constantly in a protected environment, you start to get paranoid and think that everything is danger, and your amygdala hijacks your reality, and you start seeing reality as you think it is instead of as it is. And this is why I get people throwing the term Satanism at me when I'm promoting the way to get out of your lower nature. I'm promoting how to live like Jesus asked you to live, but they don't like it and they get scared because the amygdala is going mad. So there's all of this shit about Satan all over the place, but I'm talking about a deep-rooted spiritual force that exists in my life and other people's lives, and it is there to bring us down and to hold us back from expressing the full glory of God. And at the end of the day, all you've got to do is fight it. And if you're fighting it inside yourself, then you do that by being gentle and loving, not with fists, and not with anger, and not with malice. You have to fight it gently, because that is what it flees from. It flees from the humility and the gentleness of spirit. It can't stand that level of light, and it just leaves the room. It just goes. But sometimes you have to fight it with your hands. As I say, I've stood bearing down with a group of men wishing to kidnap our children with a machete in my hands. I'm not a person like that. But I understood. I understood that sometimes that's how you have to fight it. And other times you have to be savvy and see where your chinks in your armour are. If you have addictions, these are chinks in your armour. But for me, Share Tanzania has chinks, and I can see them because I've had time to. And I'm going to fix those chinks. And I had chinks as well, and I'm going to restore my health. And when I restore my health, I'll come back twice as efficient as when this began. Because I'm not going to sit by and let this weak, dark little force try to slow down what is morally and lovingly correct and right. The comfort and well-being of innocent children is what this force does not want. And it's trying to bring me down. And I admit, hats off, it slowed me down. But it hasn't won. And it hasn't won because, as it states in the Bible, I'm likened to a tree planted near a river, and when the drought comes, it still bears good fruits. In other words, I kept fighting because I had God. And for all at this point there was a chink in the armour and this little thing got through, and God can't promise you perfect health. You know, he's not the prince of this world, as we're told Satan is. But I fought. And I kept and stayed the course. Because God made sure that his presence was always there. So, don't give up the fight. When he comes, tell him to take a knee. Tell him to get out of the way. Or tell him to get behind you, as Jesus did. You're stronger than him. You're stronger than him. Single sunbeam can cast away many shadows, as St. Francis said. Just make sure that you're shining your light. As long as you're shining your light, you'll come under attack, but you will win. You will win. Just as I will win. God bless, guys.
You mean you just gonna sit there and let the enemy take your stuff, take your life, take your family, take your son, take your daughter, take your grandkids? You just gonna lay back and let him have your job, have your influence, have your business? You just gonna hand it over without a fight? You're not gonna fight or nothing. You're not gonna do spiritual warfare. You're not gonna fight in the spirit. You're not gonna go into the, you're just gonna let him have your territory. You better fight for your territory. I don't care what it is, your legs, your arms, your toes, your kids, your company, your finances. I don't care what it is, you gotta fight for your territory. You have to fight to keep your eyesight. You have to fight to keep your energy. You have to fight to keep your movement. I mean, you have to fight for stuff that you used to take for granted. My God, do you hear what I'm saying to you? I say, I will fight. Don't you think for 1 minute that I won't fight. Don't you think I won't fight. Just because I'm 12 don't mean I won't fight. David was a boy when he killed Goliath. Don't let the fat fool you. I'm fat, but I'll fight. I'm gray-headed, but I'll fight. I'm a woman, but I'll fight. I'm an old man, but I'll fight you right now. Yeah, oh my God, I mean, I'll fight you right now.